It was once said that action without vision is only passing time. Vision without action is merely daydreaming. But vision with action can change the world. Meet Geraldine Alsham, known to many as Mama G. Mama G is a servant leader who is passionate about bringing awareness to injustice within the education system.
Hello, my name is Cynthia Mack. I am an elementary school teacher here in Wade County. And I have been teaching 20 years plus. Which is a court order that states that North Carolina is to provide all students with a sound basic education. Currently, that is not.
She has fought on the front lines for equity and equality for our students and families for over 40 years. Mama G is a strategic planner and also a program provider. Seen here leading restorative practice models that promote a safe space for courageous conversations to happen without judgment or bias. In hopes to gain new perspective and understanding. Mama G continues to connect with educators, parents, and education administrators, being the voice of the voiceless, to ensure that our rural, poor Black and brown children with disabilities and language barriers are not forgotten in the pursuit towards gaining a sound, basic, free, and appropriate education. Mama G is indeed a freedom fighter.
What's up, good people? Welcome, welcome, and welcome to Dropping Pearls with Mama G. It is your boy, Mr. YM4C, aka Bro Troy, and tonight's show is sponsored by the good people at Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation and the Tides Organization, a force for social good. What's going on, Mama G? How you feeling?
I am awesome, alive, on top, and not below.
Yes,
always a good day. Always a good day. Always.
Yes. Well, you know, I'm excited to get in this conversation, Mama G. I do want to jump into it. I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity here at Bro Code Productions to have it. But I have to ask, Mama G, I know I hate to start this way, but I have to ask, man, what's your take on this presidential debate that happened last week? What's your take on that? Excuse me. I have to ask.
Well, that debate was horrible, as we would expect it to be, but it was very representative of our president. It was a true picture of who he was, and you know, I just love it when a plan comes together.
Really love it when a plan comes together. You don't know about that Hannibal. That's the A-team. That's that. I love it when a plan comes together.
I love it when a plan comes together. You know, let me first say I ain't wishing death on nobody. Nobody. But I do declare unto the Most High. I do declare, Lord, please sentence him 30 days in hell. 30 days in hell should be his punishment.
Small play.
And let him come back. And let him come back a changed man in the name of Jesus. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Well, Mama G, if I can piggyback anything off of that, I've got 2 words. Please vote.
Yes.
Yes. We can't afford to sit this one out.
Yes, we gotta vote. I'm dragging the vote
part at the ballot box this November. I can't tell you who to vote for, but you know, use bank account, common sense, and a little bit of heart. Also, do your part to ensure our community receives its fair share of funding to support food programs, schools, child cares, hospitals, and so much more. In addition to voting, Mama G, I would really encourage those to respond to the census. Now, I know there's a lot going on with it now, but you can respond to the census questionnaires 3 different ways.
Already, I've done my part.
Okay. Mama G,
passing out census, filling out census reports as we give out food. We've had 3 or 4 sites that we've given out food, Fathers Forever.
Yeah.
So we did the census there. We just got through passing out voter guides
Okay.
to the college students. We just delivered 1,140 masks.
Okay.
We split them up between St. Aug University and Shaw University because we got to be able to. We got to remember our children away from home. You know, a lot of times these kids don't have the extra money. Sometimes this is the only home that they have, and we ought to be good community neighbors. We ought to be good community. We ought to be a good village and help support our children while they're away from home. So we are working to try to make sure that they are COVID safe.
COVID safe. I like it. Absolutely. So please, you can respond to that census several ways. Like Mama G just spoke of, pull a Nike moment. Just do it. We could go to online resources for those that have it at my2020census.gov. It's on the bottom of the screen. Also, for those who would like to call in, you can do that at 844-330-2020. And if need be, you could always mail it in. But do your part. Please, we want to make sure that we continue to make our voice count. So tonight we'll be chewing the fat on recent decisions concerning the court-ordered plans to ensure all children receive a free, sound, appropriate, and basic education. We will share thoughts, findings, and resources that will shine a light on a court case that has been in deliberations for over 2 decades, the Leandrio case. Tonight we have the pleasure of sitting down with a special guest from the North Carolina Justice Center. Now, Mama G, but before we bring our guests on the show, I want to hear from you, okay? So I'm just curious, what motivated you to come up with and name this show called Dropping Pearls with Mama G?
Well, first of all, my grandmother, who was the apple of my eye, my warm and cherry pie, was a very, very, very wise woman.
Yeah.
And she taught me from the time I was a little girl, 2 or 3 years old. I never learned to read and learned to read in school. I read before I got to school. That's because my grandmother had me reading. And so she would say, "Child, come in here and drop some pearls with my Hattie." That was her name, Grandma Hattie. And so her pearls was those words of wisdom that she would pass down to me. And so the same with our community. You know, Troy, there's so much that we don't know. When we say we suffer for a lack of knowledge, God knows we suffer for a lack of knowledge. We suffer. So my role is to one, educate the community around Leandro and why it's important that we of all people, rural people, poor people, Black people, brown people, people with disabilities, English language learners, why we as their community, we as their village, why we ought to be on fire to be pushing the agenda to get more funding in for these already disenfranchised babies. You know, I don't understand why we're not upset.
Well, you know what, Mama G, I love the fire. I too am grandma's baby. I know we were talking right before the show. I just came back from Georgia visiting my 100-year young grandfather, and those pearls you talk of, you know, and that wisdom. But I heard the word literacy, and we say reading is fundamental. So I share those sentiments. Mine was grandma friend, but I could dig Grandma Hattie. That's real talk. But for the people that are listening and may not really know you as a freedom fighter, an activist, or maybe even a child advocate, Mama G, you know, what influenced you to do the work? Like what is your why?
My why is seeing we use inequity a lot today. You know, to me, it was just plain arbitrary use of policy. It was just all of the discriminatory acts that I saw as I advocated for children in public schools and as I worked. Let me talk about the why. I got Kris sitting right here, and I'm not even talking about the why, right, Kris? I'm so sorry. My son was a victim of stolen dreams. His educational dreams were stolen from him by adults in that system. Without going into the story, so my goal had my promise to him always was to kind of fight so other kids didn't have to go through what he went through, and also to my way of, because I didn't know how to navigate that process and I felt so bad, and it was also my way of giving back to other parents because of what I didn't know, and coming up with that scheme and that plan, I found I had no knowledge. And one day somebody introduced me to a program called the Parent Education Studies Program. And it was a program out of the North Carolina Justice Center. Greg Malhort was the one that led the program. And the one thing out of all the work that even I was doing in with parents, it was based on gut feelings, not what we knew, but what our guts told us was right, you know. And so when I got involved with the Justice Center, when I enrolled in that program, I enrolled in it the first year, and then 9 years later, I was still enrolling in the program because there was always something to know and understand about education law and policy. And I felt like I needed that information so that I can go back into my community and train to help parents to understand how to navigate a process that was so corrupt, that was so evil, you know. And so that was my why. Because fighting against an unjust and inhumane system that was racing against testing.
You said something really important there when you were talking about seeing. And I've always heard they'll be what they see. You turned pain into purpose because it affected you directly.
Exactly.
You know, what I really took out of that though is and what hit me home the most is the fact that I believe your son's name was Kris.
His name is Arthur Ray. We call him Ray.
Ray. His dreams were stolen. And I wonder how many kids, you know, can reflect back on that. So that's really good. Mama G, you've been, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you've been fighting this fight for over 40 years. Is that right?
44, soon be 45 years.
Mama G, what keeps you going?
Hope.
Hope.
Hope. As long as listen, children, that's my burden is children. I've come to terms with that. My burden is children. God don't let me rest. Because I tell you, if God did, if I could rest, I would. But I don't get that opportunity, you know, rest once in a while, but you know, get back on it. Because as long as there's children, as long as there's injustice, as long as there is oppression, as long as there's discrimination, denial of access to resources, you know, as long as our babies are not given that equal opportunity, that equity that we talk about, Troy, that equity that we talk about, that equity, that thing that we've been waiting for so long. For so long. So as long as that is lacking, I will be here as long as I'm here.
And I totally understand where you're coming from, right? That hit home. Your burden is children. We talk about being purpose driven. It's one thing to be driven, but to realize how, what, when, and what really fuels that fire and that drive that you have. And obviously there's a lot that needs to change, and obviously it won't happen overnight, and that's why the fight continues. It's progressive change. But if you could highlight one milestone, anything, Mama G, within the last 40 plus years of being on the front lines and fighting for this equity and equality that we speak about of our children, what milestone would that be?
The one that I am most proud of is the work that we're doing right now around restorative practices. The foundation of we're building right now what we call an online restorative practices institute, with the purpose of building relationships, organizing and building relationships, getting to engaging in dialogue so that people get to know one another, because we're never going to get rid of the biases and all the other stuff that we got until we get to know each other, until we can talk freely with one another. Two, the second thing is resolving conflict, you know, mediating conflict. We got to address the elephant in the room. We got to address the elephant in the room, and we got to come to some agreeable points. You know what I'm saying? And with a clear mindset of how we move together on. And then the final part is healing. We have suffered a lot of individual and community trauma. And we have to have healing. I mean, this has been some rough years. Yeah. And within the last from March up until now, it's really been rough, and people need some healing. We need some mental healing. We need to be able to let our hair down. We need a safe place. And so that's the thing that I'm most proud of, how it has brought people together, organizations and agency heads, and how it helps us to be able to work better together. And when we can, as organizations, when we can work together, that means that our work is more effective.
Sure.
And when our work is more effective, that means that people are actually getting served. And that's when we see change.
Effective working together equals change.
Equals change.
A fist, not a finger. Right? I love it. Not just restorative practices, but you said 3 things that really hit home for me. 1, relationships. 2, communication. And 3, healing. And the relationships and the communication lead to healing through consistency of efforts. Good stuff. So for those who are just tuning in, it is Dropping Pearls with Mama G. I am with the activist, mother, grandmother, great grandmother. Okay, I had to be careful on that one. I didn't know, but that's absolutely right.
7 generations.
You better talk that, Mama G.
Yes,
so
7 generations.
Grandma Hattie dropped pearls on her children, and Mama G being one of those that she had opportunity, grandchildren, excuse me, to be in earshot of, and now passing on that torch. So for those that are checking in, we're talking about the Leandrio case, right? We want to dig deep into the conversation. Mama G, it's time to unfold this conversation. It's time to introduce a special guest. So tonight we have joining us Kris Nordstrom. Kris is a senior policy analyst with the North Carolina Justice Center's Education and Law Project. Kris has been the lead researcher and author of numerous research projects, policy briefs, as well as commentaries focused on education policy and its impact on advancing economic and social injustice. So, Mama G, please help me welcome Kris Nordstrom to the show. What's going on, Kris?
Yes, indeed.
How's it going, everyone?
Good. Kris, man, tell me a little bit about yourself. I know I read 2 or 3 sentences of the bio, but please don't let me just be a surface guy. Please tell me a little bit about yourself. What's your background? Maybe even potentially your family dynamic. But Kris, what makes you you?
That's a great mystery. I grew up in Rhode Island and came down to North Carolina to go to college at Wake Forest, and fell in love with the state and have stayed here ever since. So lived in Charlotte for about 5 years.
Okay.
Then in 2006, started working at the North Carolina General Assembly on the nonpartisan staff there, the education staff, helping them write the budget every year, trying to help them sort of develop programs. So got to see the General Assembly sort of transition from when the Democrats controlled everything to when the Republicans controlled everything. So I was there for 9 years. So very extensive education in this state. And I think for a lot of your viewers and listeners, one thing that people might not realize is that when it comes to our schools, there's the federal government that we all pay attention to, and it's there in the news all the time. And you got your local school boards, but really it's the state when it comes to your schools that's really pulling all the punches when it comes to how much money the schools get, most of the laws they have to follow. So it was really exciting to be able to work there and have such an impact. But left there in 2016, and since then I've been working at the North Carolina Justice Center, where I met Mama G early on, and it's been great from there. Getting to connect with advocates like Geraldine, and there's so many people across the state working to reverse the course of sort of the backwards direction we've taken since control of the General Assembly changed in 2010.
Absolutely. Well, we're definitely excited to have you, brother. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as Grandma would say, let's chew the meat and spit out the bone. So
there you go.
we spoke of this court case. This case I was speaking of is the Leandro versus the state of North Carolina. This case was first filed back in 1994. Mama G, please help us catch us up. You know, for those that are listening, man, how or why did this case come about? Kris, if you don't mind, or Mama G, would you like to start us off? Who we got?
I'm going to start you. I'm going to let Kris handle that part because that's why Kris is on here to talk about the history of Leandro and give you that part. What I want to talk about is why is Leandro important to this community?
Okay.
Leandro is vital to this community because we're talking about school funding. You know, our kids are not in school right now, but our children are so far behind, Troy, far behind. They were already so far behind.
Yeah.
And with this pandemic, when this pandemic hit, you know, I don't think we have any concept as to really how much further behind that targeted population of children that I'm talking about, those rural children, poor children, Black children, brown children, children with disabilities, and those English language learners. It bothers my soul to even think about how much further no, I don't have to think because I know how far they are behind. I had a kid right at the end of summer. We had when they closed schools, and so I did a little video of him and he and his brother. And so I asked him, you know, how was virtual school for you? And this kid's only in the second grade. You know, one is in the second and one was in the sixth, and they talked about how difficult. Well, he said he hadn't learned nothing, not one thing. He said, "Mama G, I still got 150 assignments to do." And I said, "How can a little boy like you have 150 assignments?" He said, "I'm telling you." And he told me it was in Black, whatever that thing is that they go dojo, whatever it was. He said that's what he did in dojo. so I'm saying to him, I said, "But why do you still have 150 assignments?" He said, "Mama G," he said he acknowledged that he played when he was in class, right? He acknowledged that he played, that he was in class. He said, "But I can't do this." He said he couldn't do the work at home because one, there was nobody there to you know, help him get back on track. Maybe he didn't know how to work it up, but he was very adamant about the fact that he just couldn't do the work at home. And so was his brother, who was up in the seventh grade. And so I see children like this all the time, you know, kids who are in communities, church community centers, you know, who are trying, they're struggling. That's why we got to know, and this is why we have to understand why Leandro is important to this community, why it's important to the community, and why we must act, and why we got to do better than what we've done over the past 25 years in acting on Leandro. So let me calm it down.
Well, I get it. I know me and you have talked. I have a 6-year-old at the house, and we hugging and kissing each other, really just encouraging and supporting, and that's so important. You know, having that support and having that encouragement, because this is different for everybody, from the child all the way up. But at the end of the day, it's a trickle-down effect. And who it affects most is who you just spoke of. Yeah. And you talked about earlier, which is the burden of the children.
Right. So let's let Kris talk to us about.
You know, Kris, tell me what you got, brother.
All right.
What is Leandro? What is it?
All right. Well, Geraldine really touched on it. You know, the pandemic has sort of exposed a lot of the inequities that we know have been existing. That, you know, the schools in North Carolina haven't been working like they're supposed to for Black kids, for rural kids, for English learners, for disabled kids, for LGBTQ kids. You know, across the board, you know, there's several, you know, unless you're a rich white kid, the schools haven't been working that great for you. And that at the end of the day, that's really what Leandro is about. So 26 years ago, 1994, 5 low wealth counties, Cumberland, Halifax, Hoke, Robeson, and Vance counties brought suit against the state saying that what you're doing, you know, you guys are our state constitution says that you guys are supposed to provide every child with a good education, and you're not doing it. And in the ensuing 25 years, there have been all sorts of hearings and back and forth, and the courts every time been saying, you know what, North Carolina, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing for kids, you know, especially the kids we talked about earlier. And so this was going on, and really nothing was happening, though, to actually deliver results for kids. But in 2017, the two sides of the case, the state and the plaintiffs, decided to stop fighting. They said, what will it take to actually change our education system in North Carolina so all kids are given the education they deserve under our state constitution?
Right.
And so what the court did is they hired some outside consultants, some of the best education experts in the country. And they came into North Carolina and looked at the state for about 2 years. And they put out a report that came out in 2019. It's called people mostly refer to it as the WestEd report, because that was the main consultant. So you'll hear people talk about the WestEd report or the Leandro report or the Leandro consultants report. That's what they're talking about. And what's so exciting about that is, for the first time in a quarter of a century, we now have a roadmap. So we know what it takes. We know how much it costs. We know the steps that it'll take to get there. And the only thing we need now is the political will for our General Assembly to start cutting the checks, start changing the laws, to create a system that doesn't just operate mostly for the benefit of wealthy white children.
For those that are just checking in, you're with Dropping Pearls with Mama G. We've got, of course, Mama G, activist, philanthropist, nonprofit leader, the queen of the burden of children. She's fought in the trenches for equal rights as it pertains to our poor, Black, disenfranchised language learners, early language learners within education for over 40 years. We also have Kris Nordstrom from the North Carolina Justice Center, and we're talking about the Leandro case. So, Kris, you spoke of it earlier, writing the check. The Ed report, this report that now has somewhat of a blueprint, maybe a coaching scheme if you're playing football. Tell us more about that. What is legislation? What is the General Assembly saying? What is the next steps? And really more so, how will it help those disenfranchised that we talk about?
Yeah, so the WestEd report really calls on, has a number of findings and a number of recommendations. It's about 300 pages long, so I wouldn't expect everyone to dive into that like I've had to, but it really boils down to about 7 things. First is adequately and equitably funding our schools. So what that means is increasing funding overall. They call for increasing state funding by about 40% in the long term, which is about a little under $4 billion, which sounds like a big price tag, but given the cuts that have been made to education over the last decade and the tax cuts that have mostly benefited corporations and wealthy North Carolinians, that's a readily affordable price tag. We have the wealth in the state to be able to adequately fund our schools. So increasing the overall level of funding, but also being smarter about how we direct that funding and directing more of that funding to the kids who need it the most. We know kids, not every kid has that. Like Geraldine said, not every kid has that supportive parent at home. Not every kid has access to, going to museums, going on family vacations where so much learning happens. All of those things, we know that we need to direct more resources, where the kids are that need the most help. So that's number one. Number two is creating a diverse and highly effective cadre of teachers and school leaders, principals, assistant principals. And I think that focus on diversity is very important. There's been some incredible research over the past few years looking at students in North Carolina, and especially for young Black boys, having a teacher that looks like them has incredibly shockingly large positive effects that go on. Even just having one elementary school teacher has effects well through going into college. So it's great that the state's finally recognizing that and taking efforts to sort of proactively attract and retain teachers of color. So our teaching corps looks more like the students they serve. Number 3 is early learning, increasing investments, make sure every kid who's eligible for Pre-kindergarten has a pre-kindergarten slot, so they'll enter K-12 ready to learn. Number 4, support for high poverty schools. So that means things like access to meals, access to healthcare, especially mental health, changing the curriculum so it's culturally responsive, and providing training for teachers. Like Geraldine said, talking about restorative practices. That doesn't just happen by sort of waving a magic wand. You need to actually spend some resources and get teachers training so they know how to do that sort of thing. So we aren't, we break that school to prison pipeline that's been harming so many kids in your communities. Also overhauling the assessment and accountability system. So we're not just doing a bunch of multiple choice tests at the end of the year that are biased as well. And then taking the results of those tests and saying that schools that are enrolling mostly kids from families with low incomes, automatically labeling them as failing schools on the basis of these biased tests. And finally, the final thing is something I hope we can get Geraldine involved in, which is creating a board of experts to continually monitor the state's progress towards meeting these goals and then adjusting the plan accordingly. Right now, I think the plan is to try to get there within 8 years. This is year 1, and the General Assembly didn't do anything. So we're already sort of behind 1 year because the General Assembly didn't act. But we're working with advocates across the state to make sure they do act. And if they don't act, that we will have politicians that will act going forward. So that's why November is so important.
Absolutely. I share those same sentiments. Mama G, what you got? I know the wheels are turning.
No, I'm just kind of calming down from the beginning. Kris, you did an excellent job of breaking that down so that people can understand. Troy, if there's anything that I want more than anything else, and that is for the general public, and particularly people of color, to understand, we have not had a real movement around education as Black people. We haven't had a movement around education since the 60s. We haven't had a movement. You can't tell me that we can't see or we don't understand the data. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's we've gone from the achievement gap from whatever year it was. It's been 20 years or more, I know. You know what I'm saying? So we know and we understand the data, but do we not have some type of Black education coalition? Why do we not have a strong parent coalition around Leandro, around school funding? Because and it's not just Black. And I want to keep saying it, rural. Because this is what the coalition needs to look like. Rural folk, Black folk, brown folk, folk who got children with disabilities, people who got English language learners, children with, did I name them all? Rural, poor, Black, brown, children with disabilities, and English language learners.
I think you got it.
That if you kin to, got a cousin, got a brother, we ought to be concerned about how we educate our children. We want things that we want to see crime stop in our communities. You know what I'm saying? I said I wasn't gonna do this, but I gotta do it. I said I wasn't gonna do this.
What you got, Baba G?
Listen, that demon that's up in the White House. What's his name? That's over in the hospital right now, I guess. He ran on the speech that says, and then when he says, I am the president of law and order. Well, guess what? How many of us really know what that means? What do you think that means?
I'm anxious to hear what your thoughts. What came to mind?
Ain't no thought. This is the truth. Dropping pearls with Mama G. This is the truth. This is not a thought. First of all, that was a political party at one time, back in the early 1840s, and it came about through white Protestants doing voter suppression. So anytime somebody rises up, you know, anytime people who are oppressed rise up or try to make some social change, here come that damn word. I'm the president of law and order, and we are gonna have law and order. And listen, all the black folks been murdered. You want to now talk about law and order, right? So we're gonna be you know, so many presidents have ran on that campaign of law and order, and it ain't nothing but a code word. It is nothing but a code word to inflict fear. It's about resentment of folks speaking up, and because everybody, they want to maintain. And this was done by this this report was done. It was so powerful by Professor Surratt. I think his name is Angus Surratt, over at what's the name of the university? Amherst University. And it's airing on NBC Today.
Okay.
It is now airing. It is now airing. I usually watch about every 3 or 4 hours. But when we really understand that this man has stood up before us with Trickster, who stood up and said, we're going to protect those folks who want to peacefully march, but at the same time saying to the police associations, kill them. Same thing that Barry Goldwater said, that we're going to have, when the people rose up in 68, said we're going to have peace. We're not going to have violence. By God, if I got to bring in 30,000 soldiers with guns, and he named some kind of something at the head and pointed at their head, we're going to have peace. And the theory was, to obey is to live, to disobey is to die. Do we really honestly understand what that was saying? I mean, Bush did it, Nixon did it, Goldwater. We can go on. You can go on. Listen,
Clinton did it too. If we're really being honest, Clinton did it too.
Clinton did it too.
It's unfortunate, yeah.
Clinton did it too. But Clinton added a little slick part to it and said, "Yeah, but we want law and order, but we want to make sure you get your civil rights." And what did he do with that?
Yeah.
What did he do with that? See, those are the pearls that we need to drop on our community, because see, these are the kind of pearls that you don't get, because we believe the hype.
You heard it first here. Dropping pearls with Mama G. We're talking about the Leandro case and really what it encompasses. What is the bigger picture? What is the bigger umbrella? And really unpeeling the onion, you know. And to do that,
if we don't educate our children, this cycle will continue. I don't remember which one, the other one that said the way to get rid of the violence is to educate. Is to educate the ignorant. Well, I don't totally agree with the context, the way it was said. I do know without a shadow of a doubt that we have to educate our children, and we have to be more concerned about the quality of education all of our children are getting. You know what I'm saying? And the colorism. Let's go there. The colorism that we experience in the Black community that keeps us from really advocating for all of our children, making sure that all of our children are getting what they need. You know, when we start talking about reform and when we start talking about change and we really start talking about, we got to start in the house first. Did you hear that one hit? Click, 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 click. Did you hear the roll? Did you hear it roll? Did you hear it roll? Did you hear it roll? We got to start in our house. We got to start listening with our ears and not with our eyes. Because see, we watch that damn television so much until it clogs our ears and we listen to all of these other folks' stuff or whatever, this, that, and the other. But we got to get serious. When we start to really care about the people in our community, when we really start to care about the people outside lust and greed for money and power and position, when we start to care outside of those things, then we can make some changes. But we got to first start caring outside of I have arrived. I need. I'm going to go here. I'm going to drive this. We got to care outside of that first.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what do you think is next? Kris, you talked about a little bit in 8 months. Clearly right now we're going through a quote unquote pandemic and we've got Corona going on. This was unexpected and it's right on the heels of this report that came out the end of last year, the West Ed report you talked about. So what's next? Taking that into consideration, what's the probability of laying this plan out?
Well, that's the $1 million question right there. That's what, Geraldine and I are working on every day and trying to get the word out.
That's what you're working on right now, Troy.
Yeah. So back in January, the judge overseeing the case, this guy named Judge David Lee, said, yeah, we need to go forth and do this. He asked the state to come back with a short-term plan. So things that the General Assembly should start doing for this 2021 school year that we're in right now, in order to get us where we need to be within 8 years. And so he got that plan earlier this year.
Okay.
He said, yeah, this looks like a good plan. The General Assembly should do this. And the leaders of the General Assembly, Phil Berger in the Senate and Tim Moore in the House, they said, no, we're not going to do it. You can't make us do it. We're not going to do it. And so they did nothing this year. And, our schools are in a tough spot right now. You said that you talk about there's the pandemic going on, which is increasing costs for our schools. They aren't doing the bare minimum of sound basic education. Now they have these additional costs piled up just to operate schools, to have these dual in-person programs, remote programs that we know aren't meeting, they aren't meeting every kid's needs, but I don't know what other hopes our school leaders have. It's just they're in a terrible situation right now. They don't have enough money to do a sound basic. Now they're asking them to do all of the multiple models of schooling, cleaning. So we're in a tough spot. But I think so there's going to be at the end of the year. There's going to be a more detailed long-term plan. So building off sort of the framework from that 300-page West Ed report we talked about, there's going to be a more detailed long-term plan that the court's going to submit at the end of the year. And hopefully, I think this is what's important, really, if we want to see that plan come to fruition. If we want to have a school nurse in every school, if we want to have school psychologists, if we want to have curriculum that is culturally responsive, if we want all these things that we know work for kids and we know serve.
Uh-oh. Did he freeze on me, Mama G?
Froze on you.
All right. Well, Kris will be back here in a moment. We're going through technical difficulties. He's now become a meme. So for those who are just checking in, we're here with Dropping Pearls with Mama G. We're talking about the Leandrio case, all the dynamics of it, and how it affects us in every dynamic. Mama G talked about the 6 most effective, Mama G. Let's rattle that down. Poor, Black.
The first one is rural, poor, Black, brown, children with disabilities,
and early language
English language learners. Yes, and when you say that Kris is back, and when you say what do we do, let me talk a little bit on what do we do, Kris. I mean, Troy. Right now, we are doing this. This is about educating. That's where we got to first start. We have to educate the community, because if we don't build stronger coalitions, and be a voice for those kids, you know why they can so easily say, we're not going to do it? Because there's nobody pushing back. There's nobody pushing back. I mean,
can you expand a little about how we are pushing back and talk about the Every Child NC coalition that we're working on?
Let me. When I say nobody, I'm talking about us as a community.
Yeah.
you know exactly what you talk about Every Child NC. So
okay, sure. So to the idea here is that I think I got it out before my internet popped out there for a second, but the reforms that we want to see in our schools, the additional funding, the additional programs that kids deserve, they're not going to happen without pressure from the public. The people need to pressure the General Assembly to do their job, to do what they're supposed to do the right thing here. And so to that end, we've formed a coalition. Justice Center is part of it. Mama G is part of it. We're trying to get all of the advocacy organizations. So, the advocacy organizations working for disabled kids, the advocacy organizations working for early learning. So we're not fighting for our community's thing. The English learners aren't just fighting, but we're all together working as a coalition, fighting for all kids' needs. All of the kids who have been historically denied opportunity from the state. So that organization is called Every Child NC. See, Troy popped up the link there. So please, I hope people go visit it. If you click on the link there, there's an advocate pledge, which is if you fill out your stuff there, then we'll plug you into all the work that we're doing to help keep folks informed and help figure out how we can keep folks plugged in and pressure the leadership to actually do what they need to do.
Mm-hmm. And Troy, my purpose for this work is specifically to target those particular populations, right? And build a stronger. If we have to start from the bottom and work our way up, okay, well and good. But I understand that right now there has to be some real education. There has to be some ways of helping folks to understand how important this work is. And so whatever we have to do through this little, this is a grassroots, a really community-based grassroots effort that we want to push it up. If we want to push it up to connect to Every Child NC, but as I'm a part, but I just felt like that there was a part that I really need to work on more so than anything else, because I know that in the communities that I'm in, folk don't know, and Kris said it, without a base of power, I mean, we got to have a base of power. We got to have a base of power, and we got to have a base of power of people who are affected. Yeah. Fuquay Verena, I got parents down there who don't even have internet. Yeah. Because the structure, the infrastructure is not wired for internet. Pitt County, people who don't even have the people need to have a good visual of what's happening with people, not just somebody said it, but when you see it, you can feel it. Yeah.
I'm curious, Mama G, how can parents take this information and apply it to their children's educational needs? How can we go to outside of just Every Child, and I'm sure there's plenty of information on everychildnc.org or learning more about the Leandrio, but how can they take this information and apply it to their child's needs?
What I do with parents is, as I said, and that is our task, is helping parents to understand how Leandro connects to them, getting parents involved. If it's nothing but a letter writing, just like when COVID came and we knew that folks were going to be needing rental assistance because they were going to be put out. So we got together early and we started sending letters to our legislators and whatever, and pushing our county commissioners. When that money's coming down, y'all got to allot some of it for rental. Going to our city council, saying you gotta allot some of it for people who are going to be put out after that's going to need the rent. So and the reason and it was effective. And the reason I know it was effective because a lot of the elected officials came back and said, "You really got us thinking." That's as simple as it. I mean, how simple can you lift your voice up? Because you don't never know who's hearing you. You know what I'm saying? And that's what we got to have more of it. So that's what I try to teach parents to do. If you can't, if you're working from 6 to 6 and you can't do nothing but write a letter, if you can't do nothing but sign a petition, you know, you got to help folks understand how they can help, because they can't tell you, oh, I can do this or I can do that, but you got to tell them, hey, this is how you can help.
And that stuff works.
I love it. My wise man once told me, do you, but do something. Like, whatever it is that you have to do, make that work, whatever that may be. I love it, Mama G. I heard a few things from that. If I could just recap, man. First, educate. You don't know what you don't know. Knowledge is strength. Applied knowledge is power. Grandma said, when you know better,
do better.
Do better, right? Straight like that. So educate, build, and then execute. Right?
Exactly.
So educate, build, and then execute. Take that knowledge, take that power, and forge better strengths by doing things together. Now, Kris, it's obvious data drives decision making. That's clear, right? If I read your bio, brother, for 10 years, you were doing reports similar, if not the same, as West Ed, and giving this to the same general assemblies to drive some of this decision making. But I'm curious, there's always an exception to the rule. You know, if anything, from your experience, Kris, what is the data missing? What are we not seeing in the reports, or this plan that's causing more, or potentially causing more of an achievement gap?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. The report does sort of echo a lot of things that advocates like myself, like Geraldine, have been saying for years. You know, we've always been saying our kids need more. The state's not doing enough. I put out a report called Effective and Equitable that talked about all the investments the state needed to make. And a lot of those ended up showing up in that West Ed report. Okay. I had another report called The Unraveling, which looked at how the General Assembly has really moved us backwards over the last 10 years. A lot of that history ended up in the West Ed report. But what didn't end up in the West Ed report were sort of two things. First is any mention of school capital. State laws put the responsibility for school capital on counties rather than the states. But a lot of counties out there don't have the capacity, they don't have the tax base to keep their schools up to date. And we know that there are a lot of counties out there that are struggling, especially out east, the rural counties that don't have that tax base, that need support from the state. And with financial conditions right now, it's really a great time for the state to step up and provide that support. The other thing that's missing from the report, undoubtedly, is school segregation. I wrote another report on the trends of the past 10 years and how our state is becoming more segregated and the various factors that are playing into that. And we know that kids learn when they're with other kids that look like their community. But what we have is increasingly, you have schools that are all rich kids or all kids from families with low incomes. And that makes it more difficult. You know, it's just kids aren't getting the same education. So taking that head on, obviously it's been a thorny political issue. But when it comes to actually, you know, the data you mentioned earlier, the data clearly shows that it's something that benefits all kids. And that when we integrate our schools, everyone benefits. And, you know, that price tag of delivering a sound basic education actually goes down if we actually have integration, and not just moving bodies across schools, but meaningfully incorporating integration within a school. So we don't have just, you know, honors class that's only white kids and that sort of thing that goes on too much already. So taking that head on as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the things I really picked up, and Mama G, I want to hear your thoughts, but you said it twice now, Kris, is reflective representation. You'll be what you see, right? You don't know what you don't know, and you only find out if somebody tells you. And in most cases, it's received well if it's by someone that you can relate to. Oftentimes, the first thing we do is we relate by what we see. So that reflective representation. and having that. That was one of the points that you mentioned that was in the West Ed report. And I'm curious, obviously we talk about the lack of pay as it pertains to teachers. So how does the report even talk about what's the plan to make that more alluring? Not just the job itself, but to bring on that population of teachers that can represent those that are disenfranchised, those 6 populations we talk about.
I'm on the thing, please.
Well, it starts in the colleges themselves. So making sure we have programs. We've got a lot of great HBCUs in the state, and making sure that they have the teacher preparation programs and the funding for those teacher preparation programs, and also funding to make sure that the kids in those programs don't come out of college burdened by huge student loan debt. So providing them with scholarships to become teachers. So that's sort of step one. Step two is offering wages that are competitive with other industries. So when it comes to sort of the talent competition for bringing teachers into schools, what we see is it's not so much teachers that are coming into North Carolina and saying, oh, I could make more in South Carolina. Really, the talent competition is when a kid steps on that college campus and says, do I want to become a teacher, or do I want to become a veterinarian or a lawyer or businessman? And that's where we need to start offering salaries that are competitive with those other industries where we're really falling short. And then once they get into the classroom, there's a lot more that can be done. So making sure that they're treated like professionals, that they aren't just being asked to teach to a test, that they have support within their classroom. So they have psychologists, they have nurses, they have teacher assistants, all of these positions that have been cut over the last decade. And that they have professional development. Professionals like to learn and continue to grow, which is, I think one of the greatest aspects of my job is that I learn new stuff every day. But we've cut that funding. So there's no more professional development for teachers. And so all of those, I'll just also add that the governor has a task force called the Drive Task Force that's looking specifically how to recruit and retain teachers of color. And so they'll be coming out with a number of suggestions as well that will probably be incorporated into this Leandro work going forward.
That was good there, Kris. At the end, you said the Drive Task Force?
Yes.
All one word, Drive Task Force. Okay, I'll make sure I get that up there. That's good. And that's going to help to, drive that relationship, drive the will, the want to be part of the education system. Good stuff. Good stuff. So for those who just checked in or are continuing to listen, and we're talking about the Leandro case. We've got Dropping Pearls with Mama G, and talking about the discrepancies. And I want to talk about those 6 one more time, because we gotta get that in there. Let's go over that one more time, Mama G. When we're talking about those that are affected most by that gap in education, we've got rural, Black, brown, children with disabilities, early language learners, and that was it, right? Did I?
No,
low income.
Low income. There we go. Poor.
Yeah, I use the word poor.
Absolutely.
People cringe when you say that word. So
it's a shock factor. The numbers are shocking.
Face the realities. The realities.
Absolutely. If words hurt, these numbers should hurt even worse.
Think about the children.
I've heard before, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. And the numbers show that the 6 that we just spoke of, even with a deepening the gap because of COVID, is showing it even more. So we've talked about a lot. Mama G, I want to, this is called Dropping Pearls with Mama G. And of course, obviously we've talked about a lot of great information. Kris, I could talk to you all day, brother. We 2 hours to really go over this. And you said 300 pages, there's no way we'd be able to talk about it in an hour.
Right.
But I'm wondering, you've had an opportunity to digest and process, Mama G, but I'm curious, can you give us some pearls of wisdom? What would you like to leave with the people?
What I'd like to leave with people is the thought and the concept of the seriousness of folk coming together and being a voice those children who don't have a voice. You know, I know that we are busy. I know that some of us are working. I know, but we have got to make children our priority. We got to make education our priority. You know, so my plea with the listening audience, Troy, is that something will spark within us to understand the detriment that our babies are in, and the lifelong effect that not educating our children have on them. We want to stop the school to prison pipeline. We want to stop it, and the only way we can stop it is that we start to take it seriously and look at how we lay the foundation for it. You know what I'm saying? So the saying that says, "Pay now, pay later." Pay now, pay later. Take the time now or pay later. You know, we've got to we got to do better. We got to do better. Understanding all of the many circumstances that people are facing, understanding it, you know, but still saying, you know, right now, and I say to people all the time, you know, right now, even just taking your children back to school, like placing your children in the lion's mouth and saying, "Oh, please don't bite my child. Please don't bite down on my child. Please don't." You know. So that's why we have to get involved, because the very lives of our children are at stake here, and we don't have a voice.
Absolutely,
we don't have a voice.
Absolutely,
we have a voice, but we don't have a voice. You know what I'm saying? The folks who need to. My goal is to raise up the voices of those who have been unheard.
I think that's exactly what we're trying to do through Every Child NC. So I would certainly encourage folks to go there, sign up, get involved, and we'll plug you in, and we'll try to meet you where you are. And, you know, if calling, you know, being involved in meetings, if you want to be a leader, that's great. We'll give you opportunities to lead. You know, if you can only send an email every now and then to your legislator, that works too. So please go there and sign up, and we can actually start working towards solving a lot of these issues we talked about tonight.
Yeah, we're gonna take folks through one of the things that I've learned over the years is when you're working in the grassroots community, they don't move to that level first. You got to hold them by the hand. Yeah. You got to hold them by the hand and move them there. And so that's what this work is about. It is about holding people by the hand to lead them. If that's what we got to do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's what we got to do. And it seems as though that's what we got to do. You know, we got to take you by your hand. We got to first help you to understand that you have no choice. You have no choice. And then, you know, kind of a step at a time. But I know, Troy, there's no doubt in my mind that I know together we're going to get there. Together we can do more. Together we're stronger. Fist, finger. You know, you've once said that you eat a sandwich one bite at a time, but what is it? The first step in a million miles is the first step, right? That journey. So please, for those that are listening, go to, if this is something that affects you, if out of those 6 that we talked about, if even if you're not in the 6, but you care, you're concerned, you want to be on the front lines, go to everychildnc.org. Do you, but do something. Right. So, Kris, hey, we appreciate you, brother. Thank you for taking the time out. Continue to all of those things you talked about. Continue to write legislation and do your part. Mama G, you know I love you. I appreciate you, man. We look forward to continuing to have these conversations, because everything starts with the conversation. Yes. Exactly. So if I can wrap this in a snowball, first and foremost, you talked about it earlier, Mama G, relationships, communication, and healing. You know, the first step is to build those relationships. Build the relationships. Why? The second thing is communicate, right? Talk about it, right? Well, the second thing is mediate. See, we build relationships through dialoguing, through having conversations. Then we resolve any conflict, because see, we may not agree on the same things, right? Sure. So we need to resolve any type of conflict that we got. We got to get that resolved, and then we move to healing. Heal, absolutely. Then we move to healing, and that's when we have community. When we move to that place of healing. I love it. Well, she said it the best. It's called Dropping Pearls with Mama D. There it is. We're going to drop the mic right there.
So
right.
Thank you again for tonight's sponsor, which is Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation and the Tides Organization, a force for social good. Kris, thank you again, brother, for joining us tonight. Mama G,
thank you, Troy.
Pleasure. I love you like a fat kid loves cake.
All right, now you really love me, baby.
Peach cobbler, pound cake, all that good stuff. As always, you know, just from who we are as a people, we want to leave you with some positivity. And we try to do that in the form of a quote. And tonight's quote is from activist and trailblazer Harriet Tubman. And it reads, "Every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars to change the world." So thank you again for dropping in with Dropping Pearls with Mama P.
Good to see you.
Next time. Peace.
All right, peace out. Take care. Thank you.